Let's unpack those movements now with Faheema Adia from Momentum Securities. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon, as always, Faheema. And let's start with the overall market before we get into the big story of the day, the Rand. It ended just a little under 1/3% in the green. Of course, we did see global markets performing well today, but what would you say were some of the other positive contributors?
Afternoon, Afiwa. Yes, so the JSE closed marginally up today, driven by the resource and industrial sectors. Global markets were also higher due to signals from the Fed that US interest rates may begin to slow in the next year. And there's also been some signs from China that those lockdowns will begin to ease in the next year. But unfortunately, like it was said earlier, the Rand and local bonds missed out on this, mostly due to the Phala saga and the potential impeachment of President Ramaphosa. If we look at SA bond yields, that was also up, while the Rand was actually one of the worst performing currencies amidst developing markets on the back of these political concerns.
And that's quite concerning. I mean, financials, Faheema, I haven't seen this personally in a while. 6.85% in the red today, and partly because of that weakness that we saw in the Rand. So, I mean, all indications, particularly global indicators, show that the Rand should actually be strengthening. And now we've been plunged into all sorts of uncertainty. And one wonders what the short to medium term outlook for the local unit will be here.
Yes, it's very concerning because, given the weaker US dollar, you should definitely start seeing an improvement in the Rand, but because that has been a factor leading to its depreciation over the past few months. It was just that very strong US dollar. And now that we see, more positive sentiments coming out of the Fed, one would expect that the Rand should actually start performing a bit better. But obviously, that is now being tempered by the political uncertainties in the country. So I think definitely a lot of uncertainty there in the next few months.
Yeah, let's get into, before we get into company updates, and I just wanted to say, it is quite unfortunate that the Rand has tanked as much as it has when the price of Brent crude, Faheema, has been relatively low, affordable levels for us as a net fuel importer. So we're definitely not going to be benefiting from the lower Brent crude prices, are we?
No, we won't. So interestingly, today it seemed that the oil price did start to show some recovery. It was down the past few days after those disruptions in China. But today it recovered to about $88 a barrel. Seemed to be driven by the positive results coming from that Fed meeting and also from those potential easing of lockdowns in China. So bear in mind that China has a very big impact on the price of oil, and whatever happens there then kind of has a parallel impact in terms of what happens with the oil price. So because of now those lockdowns starting to ease, we could probably expect to see better oil pricing. And then the other thing that we need to keep an eye out for is that there is that OPEC meeting coming up this weekend, and the signs they are showing that they may look to cut supply of oil, which will then put further pressure on that price.
Let's look at Vukile's numbers that they recently released, Faheema. They're not disappointed with them at all. In fact, despite the current economic climate, they didn't look all too bad. But the sector is quite a difficult one to navigate, and it shows in some components of that statement.
Yeah, so definitely a good set of results. Very strong operational performance coming from the South African and the Spanish portfolios. So in South Africa in particular, they have a lot of exposure to the township portfolios and rural shopping malls, which makes it quite a defensive type of business model. Those portfolios have been doing very well even amidst COVID. So I think the current results are quite favorable. While earnings per share was positive, headline earnings per share was lower, but that was due to certain forward exchange contracts. So we don't think that's problematic. The NAV also increased by about 6%, and we're seeing a lot of potential growth coming through from that Spanish portfolio. It's also really good to see that their vacancies are at an all-time low, both in South Africa and in Spain. And guidance for the full year has come in at between 5 to 7%. So we're quite satisfied with those numbers.
Yeah, and then a final one, the deal between Sanlam and Absa to create a black-owned asset management firm, I think worth 1 trillion rand, that statement indicated. Faheema, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so they released that statement to say that all those conditions have been met for that transaction to go ahead. I definitely think it's a very favorable development, given that the financial services sector in general has been quite slow to transformation. So it's definitely a step in the right direction. And then Absa's also signed a 10-year distribution agreement with Sanlam, and the scale of this new business and broader distribution that this brings will definitely be beneficial for clients, in my view.
Definitely, Faheema. As always, thank you very much for joining us this evening. That is Faheema Adia, who's from Momentum Securities. Sally,